Hi everyone, welcome back to our YouTube channel. In the polytunnel again. I'm sure you feel at home in here now. As you can see behind me here, all the cosmos is growing on nicely, and we've also started with some zinnias and they're just starting to germinate now. I'm starting zinnias because I've got the luxury of a polytunnel. Now my polytunnels are essential to my business, but when I was sowing seeds this week, I was thinking to myself, having covered space as a home gardener is quite a luxury actually, and I know there might be a lot of people who want to grow flowers and think they can't do it because I spend all my time in the polytunnel. That is really just to give me a kickstart, and this video is for those of you without any covered space, because everything we're going to do today is going to be done outside and it's going to be done for speed and ease. So if you haven't got covered space, and if you're new to growing cut flowers and you're thinking, oh, it might take loads of time and I haven't got the time and it might be really difficult and I might need loads of kit, this video is for you. What we're going to be doing today is setting up a new bed using a no-dig method. Got myself some old cardboard, I've gathered up some spent compost from our seed trays, and I've got some homemade compost and a barrow of manure. And I've also selected 5 of my easy to sow, easy to grow favourite seeds for cut flowers. So these I've selected because they're basically fail-safe varieties. First things first, let's cultivate the bed. Now we're going to be using a no-dig method, and if you've never done no-dig before, I suggest you give it a go because it's a really quick and simple way of creating a bed. One thing to consider when you're putting down your cardboard is that you're putting down cardboard without any plastic tape or staples or anything like that in it. And then it's one wheelbarrow of manure, which I'm just going to tip on the cardboard, trying to get it all on the cardboard, not outside the bed. And I'm just going to rake that out a bit so that we've got some manure going right the way across the bed. And now we've got one heaped wheelbarrow full of our homemade compost. So you can see that there, it's still got a few twigs in it, but it'll be absolutely fine. So I'll spread that over the top now. So if you haven't got homemade compost, I'd say I'd probably put on about another 100 litres of compost there. So we're up to 200 litres of organic matter. And just raking that out so it covers the bed evenly. Now layer 3 is a layer of spent compost. Now by spent compost I mean it's compost that's already been used before. So we've already sown into this compost, and everyone has seeds that don't germinate as well as other seeds. And then all that compost could potentially get wasted. Well, we don't waste it here, we spread it on the beds. And this is going to be the final layer of our no-dig bed. So again, just spreading it out evenly across the bed. There's about another 100 litres in here. So there we go. First off, we laid the cardboard, watered it. Then we put down layer 1, which was 100 litres of manure. Layer 2, which was 100 litres of our homemade compost. And then layer 3, which was 100 metres of spent compost. Now we've got about 6 inches of organic matter laid onto some cardboard, and we're ready to start sowing. So what seeds have I selected? So all beds need a showstopper, and in this case the first seed that I've chosen to sow is definitely a showstopper, and we're going to be sowing malope seed. Malope's a really lovely hardy annual. It gets quite tall in this field. It gets to around about 70 to 90 centimetres tall. So it needs to be in the middle of the bed so that it doesn't smother out the slightly smaller flowers that we're going to put in amongst it. Now it produces a really big plant. So each plant will stretch to a width of about 50 centimetres. So we need to be aware of that when we go to sow it. And the next seed that we're going to be sowing is what a lot of people would say is a classic cut flower. And it's so easy to grow. That's cornflower. Now I've selected black ball to put in this bed just because of the colour combination that I'm going for. But all of the cornflowers are really easy to sow and grow and are a very fast crop to grow. All I would say with cornflower is, because you get so many seeds in a pack, don't fall into the trap of sowing every single seed. Every single seed that you sow that germinates is likely to produce about 10 stems of quality cut flowers. So you don't actually need that many. And if you really get into sowing cornflowers, then I would recommend that you do it as a successional crop, planting some in the autumn and then a couple of sowings in the spring, so that you have them staggered when they come to flower. Another tall variety of cut flower, we're going to be sowing some cosmos today. So now cosmos is a half-hardy annual, and I would generally not be sowing half-hardies out this early, but it is one of the hardier half-hardy annuals. So by the time it germinates, which I suspect will be in about two weeks' time from an outside sowing, and it starts to produce leaves, we are into May, and then the frost should be, hopefully, fairly mild by that point, but we'll see. I might be making a big mistake. And the shortest cut flower that we're going to be sowing is calendula. So that's calendula seed there. Now this is gathered seed from our field last autumn, so I'm not entirely sure what sort of tone of yellowy, orangey peach it's going to come out, but the two varieties that I've been growing here are Sunset Buff and Snow Princess. So hopefully we're going to end up with somewhere in between those. Snow Princess is a slightly taller variety with stronger stems, and in this field we get about 60 to 70 centimetres of stem off those, and Sunset Buff is slightly shorter and we tend to get about 30 to 50 centimetres of stem on those. So hopefully we'll end up with some nice looking calendula in this bed. So interspersed with all these flowers, it would also be nice to have some texture and some filler to mix with them. This is where this comes into play. So this here is crest, believe it or not. Now this isn't the cultivated varieties, this isn't Thalasp, it isn't penny crest. This is just, as it states on the moulds packet, plain common crest, which I find quite amusing. So this is just sandwich cress, and you would generally see it in supermarkets growing about this big. Now I absolutely love cress because it grows so easily, and it's absolutely fabulous filler for bouquets. So you let it germinate to its normal little cressy stage that you would see in your sandwiches, and then what you let it do is grow and grow and grow, and then it'll start producing little tiny white flowers. Now we're not growing it for the white flowers. What we're growing the crest for is the seed pods that it produces, and they'll come after the flower. So bide your time and leave it, and then you'll see tiny little disklets of green, and you can either cut them green or you can leave them to dry on the plant and they turn a straw colour, and then you can harvest them at that stage. And it also dries really nicely for winter arrangements as well. And I will guarantee that you will never grow an easier filler stem than cress. Firstly, we need to water our new bed, because we're going to be direct sowing, so we don't want the seeds to go into dry compost. So now that we've watered the bed again, what we've done is not only create a nice habitat for the seeds to germinate in, but we've also created a nice flat surface. Now a flat surface is going to help, because we're sowing seeds today and not putting plants in. We need to gauge the planting distances, and it's sometimes easier if you have a marker point to do that, so that we know that when each plant grows, it's going to have enough space around it to thrive. So I've got a selection of pots here. I've got a bucket, which handily says on it it's a 14-litre bucket, and it's got about a 30 centimetre diameter across the top. And then I've got a 3-litre pot, which has got about a 15 centimetre diameter across the top. And then I've got a 1-litre pot. Now these are all going to help us when we come to sow our seed. That's because we've pre-watered this area. Now by doing that, not only are we creating a brilliant environment to sow our seeds into, but like when you were a kid on the beach, it's like creating wet sand, and that's perfect for creating sand castles. We're not going to be creating mud castles here, but what we are going to be doing is using these pots to make sure we mark out the right planting distances and that we're giving each seed enough space. I'll show you what I mean now with this mallope, and then we'll work our way out from there. So because our mallope's tall, it needs to be in the centre of the bed. So we're going to use our 14-litre bucket and press a hole in. Now, we now know as long as we're sowing within this circle here, we're giving our seeds plenty of room to grow into. I do actually want the plants touching. I don't want too much space around them because that'll just encourage weed growth. So we're not going to sow an awful lot of seeds, but we are going to sow more than I would sow into a cell because the likelihood is we might lose some. So I'm going to put a couple in there, and then I'm just going to make sure I'm pressing them in to the compost surface. I don't want to disturb that line because we need that as a gauge for our next planting. Now we've got our 3-litre pot, and that's going to be the gauge for planting our cosmos and our cornflower. So I'm going to do the cosmos first. Now obviously these aren't going to be permanent. If you want permanent markings, you'd have to mark out with string. So now I can start sowing my cosmos seed, and I'm just going to put three seeds into each one of those circles, pushing them down into the centre. Now same size pot again to mark off for our cornflower. And what I'm going to do is empty some seed into my hands and put about 3 seeds into the centre of each circle again. And I'm going to sow them as I go around so I don't get confused which one's cosmos and which one's cornflower. Same sowing depth as the cosmos. So just in the centre with a little bit of compost on its head. So hopefully you can see all the circles there on camera. Now what we're going to do is interplant using our crest seed for all the gaps between these plants so that the whole area is covered by flowers and green growth. Now, like I say, crest is the easiest thing in the world to grow. I'm not even putting a line in. What I'm doing is just going to trace around with my fingers little areas that I want it. I'm being quite generous with the seed, as you can see. And I won't be thinning the seed out at all. I'll just let it grow into each other. And finally, another good watering in. So there we go. What could be simpler than that? This 3-metre square patch took 30 minutes. It took some cardboard. It took 300 litres of compost and organic matter, a rake, a watering can, 3 different size pots, and 5 packs of seed. And if you're watching this and you knew all that and you're more advanced to cut flower growing, then share some of your beginners' hints and tips in the comments below to get more people started in growing cut flowers and sharing our passion. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.